Alright, hey guys, welcome to another video. It's been about a month or so. I've been traveling, so been quite busy. But today just gonna go over what I thought was a layup short trade, probably the best setup of the week last week. And yeah, gonna be going over MLGO, the parabolic short / liquidation. Alright, really quick, what is MLGO? Chinese hologram company. It's a D-SPAC. It's never filed or made their S1 effective. It's basically a fugazi-ass company, and it's got a history of liquidating, right? The other name that comes to mind, if you look at those factors, obviously is Holo. And I'll show, MLGO did the same shit as Holo right after its D-SPAC. Everyone should be aware of this one in September. If you aren't, you're probably living under a rock. But yeah, you get the gist of it. So MLGO, really quickly look at the daily. So it had that D-SPAC gap up, which they liquidated, which is this intraday chart here. Then it had that run back in September, which I'll go over in a sec, and then obviously this recent one here. So I mean, just looking at the chart, you can tell what kind of a name this is. If it takes you, if you need more than that, then it takes 2 seconds to figure out it's a Chinese company, and it's very simple. I don't think it's possible to not know what kind of name this is, unless, like I said, you live under a rock, or you haven't done any work at all in the past couple months. But yeah. So then, here's that run up in September. So multi-day run up. They gapped it up off of a PR, I'm pretty sure. I might be wrong if they had a PR or not. And then they got this massive intraday move with a large blow off. And then they, obviously like liquidated it or, sold it off pretty hard. I think the key thing to know with these, you don't really have to be early. And the trend is your friend. It's pretty much quite simple in my opinion. And then another similar name, which is a similar move to this prior MLGO one, was MTC. So it had a multi-day run-up, also Chinese, had that big blow-off move, and then they eventually liquidated it. So, right now, it should be pretty clear that MLGO, always should be in the back of your mind that this is a name that, can liquidate, can be a full round tripper, can retrace a move in a single day. So I think it's just important to have that in mind always. So I'll quickly look at the day one first, and why my thoughts are, and it was an easy avoid, and then we'll look at the day two, which I thought was a layup short. So obviously in the pre-market they put out a PR, bogus PR. Don't even have to look into it. But there just really wasn't much range. And if you look at all the other moves, all the other times it sold off hard, it had a big move. It wasn't just a pop from 3 to 4 and then they sold it off, right? Also, the volume ran to the open is not much. I mean, doing 30, 40, 50K bars. This is obviously a 2-minute chart. What can they really do with that? I just don't see it, right? We know this has a history of big intraday moves. It's a manipulated Chinese name. Maybe, people that like to short gappers, maybe have a stab at it. But, for me, this is not a good setup at all. And, I didn't touch it at all this day. And then if you just look at the way it traded, right? I mean, it just respected levels so cleanly, right? Had that, opening pull off, wasn't really breaking down, reclaimed a key level from the pre-market, went sideways, broke out, held the key level from the pre-market, never breaking down, holding below it, blah, 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 same thing again, always maintaining a clean uptrend. And then, had this big, large sideways consolidation after a big volume bar. And then you can see right before breaking out, volume just picked up. This looks like, similar example of that Lance Long, which he went over on VVOS. But yeah, and then once we got this candle here, this big breakout move, it's like, okay, this is a decent move. It's churning a ton of volume. This is worth watching in my opinion for them to turn on the jets on and potentially liquidate intraday. The only concern why I think it's less likely, it's just the time of day. It also never really had a really parabolic move, I would say, either. I mean, it just looks like a steady grind up, still holding a trend. To me, it was worth watching, but with these, I'm always more comfortable being late than being early, and so I never touched it. Still, I think if it started, let's say if this here failed and started going under 7, I think that'd be a lot more interesting of a trade for me. But yeah, and then continues to hold this uptrend, not breaking down and holding below prior levels, closes strong, and then that's that, right? To me, I know a lot of people got bent up short. But I think if you did, I think you just weren't really trading the chart in my opinion, because I think it just gave so many signs to not be short at all. Right. And then, pulled it in the after hours, probably, a good amount of people probably felt comfortable swinging short. And then, late into the after hours has this big move getting above prior highs, nearly tripling in the space of a couple hours. So to me, when I saw this, now it changed from, just a name which could potentially be liquidation to now also a parabolic short setup with the potential to be liquidation. So it was a bit of a 2-in-1 setup for me. And so coming into the open, I'm always patient with these kind of names. It's just the way I like to trade. So I'll play these things with wider risk once the trend changes. So for me, in the pre-market, I can see that there's definitely reasons to get involved. It's just not really my style. But I think when we come in and test and just start failing against 18 a couple times, I think you can for sure put on a starter size, a feeler size, versus those after hour highs and look to start positioning into it. Probably something I should have been more open to. I think it could have helped a lot, but I didn't. And then for me, this 13 level was just so clear, like you just can't, argue against it. Off the open, wick down, retest, hold again, and then we have that, up halt on strong volume right into that other resistance. And then once that fails there, to me, that's like, okay, this name just failed putting in a lower high against a key level. If this breaks under 13, I can put some short on because now I have like a stop which makes sense. I don't have to risk, shorting against 18, 19. So when it broke down this key level, it's like, okay, to me, that's now a change in trend, right? Because we're building at this whole range. Did good volume off the open, failure, to me, that's a lower high. And now breaking below this range, to me, I could put some short on and be comfortable with a stop. So I started my short down here versus the intraday high. And for me, it's just a patient game. I know that this has room a lot lower, so I don't have to rush in and put myself in a bad position. I'll show my executions in the next chart and the next slide. But yeah, and then retest and filled off this key level. I was comfortable with the size I put on here, so I wasn't in a rush to add. But I think if you didn't put it any earlier, we start rolling over. I think that's just like a clear spot to put some on. It's not something you can play versus 13. I do think you still have to keep it wide. You just haven't seen enough signs. It's still too early. Yeah, but then once it just starts breaking down, you can just see how clearly that like a trend is forming. And we'll go to a 5-minute chart. So like around this area, it's a big change. It's a clear change in my opinion that we're starting to trend down. And that was my sign to start thinking, okay, maybe now they're starting to sell, but you still want a bit of more information. The next key level, or the only really last key level I had was 10s, which was, coming into the close in the prior day. So, I was, fine to be patient, to be shorting below there, or once it starts feeling under there, just knowing that, this can go back down to 5, 6 easily. And when I do start scaling in, I can be lowering a stop, right, and trailing. And then, came slowly into there. I think I started adding a little bit, just, playing the trend. And then when we saw this push up, I covered like a tiny amount, more just so for risk management purposes. And then as soon as this failed, to me, that's like the key moment that they're selling this. And I can really start to be adding and playing for the liquidation trade at this point, rather than just a parabolic short. If I was playing just a parabolic short setup, let's say this was a different type of ticker, I would have likely just held it and my size from before. But I just know that this type of name, you can, the downside is insane, and I think everyone's aware of what these can do, right? But yeah, and then I'll show my executions and I'll go over some more thoughts. So just slowly adding, and then that was, sorry, I only have a 30-minute chart because my 1 minute, I didn't save it. And then once we had that push and failure, which is that green bar there, and make new lows, to me that was like the clear sign, and that's when I started, adding some size, but not really adding much more risk. I was more so lowering a stop. And then at that point, anyone that knows these names, you should focus on probably trailing or have reasons to get out. So my issue coming into this one was I didn't really, I had a good imagination of what it could do, but I also thought that it was a bit trickier than some other setups, like knowing exactly where you should be covering or not. I thought the only target that made sense was coming into this key level from the breakout and into view up from the prior day. But I made a mistake of covering some early instead of just trailing, because these names just have such clean unwinds. You really should be trailing because you just don't know where they can go. So I covered I think a fourth or maybe a little bit more, which is that execution there, and that makes a big difference to your overall P&L. And then into VWAP here, I got down to just over half, and then I pretty much, these triangles were executions were not much, and then I pretty much covered the other half down here. And you can see just by me not having a good reasons to get out and covering a little bit early, it makes a huge difference to your P&L, right? So yeah, that's what I would say for MLGO. Not too much. I think coming into it, it was a layup short because you have both a parabolic setup and a name that's trading really clean, in my opinion, respecting levels, and that's that. Bit of a shorter one today. Any questions, let me know.